رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نحمده تعالى ونستعينه ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح للأمة وجاهد في الله حق جهاده وارض اللهم عن الصحابة والتابعين وتابعيهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. وكل عام وأنتم بخير. عيدكم مبارك. Yesterday was the third day of Ayam al-Tashriq, but in essence we are still in Ayam Eid because the pilgrims, the Hujjaj, today most likely are on their way to Medina to visit Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma arzuqna ziyaratahu ونحن في أحسن حال مما نحن عليه اللهم آمين يا رب العالمين. And for those people who were lucky to perform the Hajj, may Allah Azza wa Jalla accept their Hajj. And from those among us who gave the Udhiyah في سبيل الله, نسأل الله عز وجل أن يتقبل منهم. May Allah accept their Udhiyah. اللهم آمين يا رب العالمين. There's two topics that I want to touch on today. One that I promised you that I would talk about last time, so that will take most of the khutbah. But before I do that, I want to make a short comment on the concept of udhiyah, the concept of sacrifice. Because all the khutbah that I hear from our esteemed imams and speakers focuses on the concept of sacrifice when they talk about Eid al-Adha. The name of Eid al-Adha is the Feast of Sacrifice. But they tend to forget a very, very important meaning that is just as important, if not even more important, than the concept of sacrifice. And that is the concept of sabr, or steadfastness, patience, pick whatever word you want. If it wasn't for sabr, ya ikhwa, Sayyidina Ibrahim would not have sacrificed. You can't sacrifice if you're not a sabr. If you read the whole biography of Sayyidina Ibrahim, I hate to use the word qissa because qissa means a fable. In Arabic, a riwayah or a qissa is not the same as what Allah Azza wa Jal tells us in Qasas al-Quran. The word qassa means, in Arabic, the word qassa al-athar means to track somebody. It means that there is real events that took place and left markings behind, and you follow it. That's called qassa al-athar. Qassa means a true event, not a fable, not a story as the translation goes. So I hate to use the word, I cannot say the story of Ibrahim because it's not a story, it's a fact. These are factual events that took place that Allah Azza wa Jal told us about in the Quran. Those factual events in the biography of Sayyidina Ibrahim, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, wa ala nabiyyina salatu wassalam, sallu ala rasulillah. Three major events, ya ikhwa. One of them was when they came to him and they're telling him, what have you done, Ibrahim? And he said to them, well, what are you worshipping? You're worshipping asnam. And تنحتون, these idols that you are chiseling yourself, you are worshipping, what kind of nonsense is this? قالوا حرقوه, burn him. They set up a huge fire and they attempted to burn him. قلنا يا نار كوني بردا وسلاما على إبراهيم. Allah spared him. A second time, يا بني إني أرى في المنام أني أذبحك. He saw in his dream that he is slaughtering Ismail. فانظر ماذا ترى. What do you think? And Sayyidina Ibrahim, يا أبت افعل ما تؤمر. Oh my dad, do whatever you've been ordered to. ستجدني إن شاء الله من الصابرين. I will be sabr. Listen to the language. It's not just Ibrahim who is sabr for being ordered to sacrifice Ismail. Also Ismail himself is saying, Inshallah, I will be sabr. Sabr all around you, akhwa. Sabr, the father, the mother, the child. All you hear about in these, again, no stories, in these events is about sabr. And then, of course, فَدَيْنَاهُ بِذِبْحٍ عَظِيمٍ. Allah Azza wa Jal spared him the agony of sacrificing Ismail. And last but not least, إِنِّي أَسْكَنْتُ مِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي بِوَادٍ غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ عِنْدَ بَيْتِكَ الْمُحَرَّمِ. He left his wife and his child in a land with no vegetation in Mecca. Pay attention to the word. No vegetation means no water. Because one can live without vegetation. You can live. I listened to a lecture the other day by an Indian surgeon who was talking about the benefits of fasting. And for the first time, I heard a surgeon, a heart surgeon, actually say that one can live without food easily for 7 days, 8 days, 9 days. You do not die if you don't eat. Your body has more than 50,000, on average, 50,000 calories stored that your body can call on to consume. But water, you cannot stay without water for a long period of time. So when the Quran says, بِوَادٍ غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ عِنْدَ بَيْتِكَ الْمُحَرَّمِ, means a valley that has no water. And that's why there's no vegetation. When I made Hajj the first time in 87, Wallahi akhwa, they were spending thousands of dollars to try to make anything grow in the vicinity of Mecca. Anything. They have some shrubs, and like we do here very easily. You go to Home Depot, you buy some plants and you put them in the ground, you give them some water every once in a while. MashaAllah, they're up to here. They're trying to do that in Mecca. Nothing lives. They're all dead. Everywhere you look, مصداقا لقوله تعالى, because Allah says, بِوَادٍ غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ, it's going to stay غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ. That's that's the will of Allah Azza wa Jal, to manifest what Ibrahim had to go through. These three events, and there's others, I'm just focusing on the three major events in the life of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And then we talk about one part of his life, which is his sacrifice. If it wasn't for the steadfastness and the sabr of Ibrahim alayhi salam, we wouldn't be celebrating. And Allah Azza wa Jal rewarded him by making us جعلنا عليه في الآخرين, by making us say اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم. في الآخرين, for thousands of years we've been saying اللهم صل على إبراهيم مصداقا لقوله تعالى جعلنا عليه في الآخرين in Surah Safa. So that's one point. The second point, sabr is two kinds, ya akhwa. We think of sabr as one thing, but it's actually two types of sabr. The sabr of Ibrahim and Ismail, according to the scholars, is a higher degree of sabr than Yaqub and Yusuf. Yaqub and Yusuf, even though Yusuf was taken away from his father and he was thrown in the well, and you all know Qasat Yusuf alayhi salam, the events surrounding Sayyidina Yusuf in Surah Yusuf. But Yaqub had no choice but to be sabr. Sayyidina Yusuf had no choice but to be sabr. And when you have no choice, if Allah Azza wa Jalla afflicted you with a sickness, what choice do you have? You're either sabr or you're not. If you're not sabr, what are you? Quran says, if you don't like it, فَارْفَعْ بِسَبَبٍ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ, hang yourself. You have no choice but to be sabr. But that's when you have no choice but to be sabr. But when you are sabr and you do have a choice, that's a higher degree of sabr. The scholars say that sabr of Ibrahim alayhi salam is also a higher degree than sabr Ayub. Even though we give example, we say, oh, he's a sabr like Sayyidina Ayub. But Sayyidina Ayub also had no choice in the matter. Allah afflicted him And he was afflicted very heavily, and he was steadfast and sabr, but he had no other choice. So I ask and pray to Allah Azza wa Jal that we are among the sabirin when we have a choice to be sabirin, not only when we are under the gun and we have no choice but to be sabirin, because that's a higher degree of sabr. As-sabr ala ta'a, ya ikhwa, to be a worshipper of Allah Azza wa Jal year after year after year. When you find somebody who is praying to Allah Azza wa Jal every day, never missing a salah for 50, 60, 70 years, that's the kind of sabr that we want. The one where you don't deviate 1 inch, 1 iota. In conclusion, what is the conclusion of sabr? All the sabr leads to what? People think that sabr is to be sought for itself, and if you are sabr, you're done. In reality, Allah Azza wa Jal says, no, there is one more step. If you really, really want to elevate yourself to the degree where Allah loves you, there's one more step. Read the ayah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. The ayah that says وما محمد إلا رسول قد خلت من قبله الرسل أفإن مات أو قتل انقلبتم على أعقابكم ومن ينقلب على عقبيه فلن يضر الله شيئا وسيجزي الله الصابرين. No, الشاكرين. You see, this ayah says, it talks about Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sayyidina Muhammad is a prophet like all other messengers and prophets. If he dies or if he lives, you walk away from this deen? You revert? You become kafir? No. The Quran says you have to hold your grounds, even after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, and stay the course in the service of this deen. And then instead, in other words, be patient. Be sabr among the sabirin. And then the ayah concludes by saying, and Allah will reward the shakirin, the grateful ones, not the sabirin. In other words, sabr in and of itself is not enough. You have to face the events with sabr and shukr. Shukr is to be grateful to Allah Azza wa Jal. And what better way to be grateful to Allah than to celebrate Eid? You see, Eid is about being grateful. Being grateful that Allah gave us the ability to stay the course one more year. Because from Eid to Eid, we rejuvenate and renew. It's a renewal. Sheikh Hanuti rahimahullah used to say it's called Eid because al-Eid ya'ud, from the word awada, which means to come back. So al-Eid means the thing that comes back, the comer back. That's what the word Eid means. It's a way for us to celebrate, to connect our present with our past and all of that. I understand that. But in reality, it's a way for us to regenerate and to reset and to thank and be grateful to Allah Azza wa Jal for giving us another year of ta'ah. أسأل الله عز وجل أن يعيده علينا باليوم والبركات. اللهم آمين. The other topic that I wanted to talk about, ya ikhwa, is the topic of, I spoke about the events in Masjid al-Aqsa, and I connected that to the events in the Muslim world in general. And I said to you in the last 2 khutbahs that we as Muslims cannot be passive. It is not appropriate or acceptable for a Muslim to be passive, to watch things happening to Muslims everywhere. And not just to Muslims, wallahi. Even weak people who are Muslim or non-Muslim. Al-dhulm, oppression, is not to be tolerated by a Muslim, regardless of whom it's inflicted on. We as Muslims are required to do something about that. So the context that I painted for you in the last 2 khutbahs, even though it was provoked by the events of Masjid al-Aqsa, but I connected it to what's going on in the Muslim worlds in general. Whether it's in Kashmir or Egypt and Palestine and Jordan, just about everywhere in the Muslim world, there is something wrong going on. There are people suffering. Whether it's what they call natural disasters like floods and things like that, we see happening in Indonesia all the time, Bangladesh, but also things that are happening that are man-made. And so that is the context. The problem now, and I have a habit of presenting my khutbah in the following manner. The first thing, anytime you want to make a presentation, and I say this to my children who are here in school, if I was giving them a lecture on how to write a good paper and how to make a presentation, The first thing that they should do is to describe the context, what's going on. Because if you want to talk about something, the other people have no idea what you're talking about unless you describe it. So you have to tell them what is going on. The next thing, you have to explain what's the problem. If there is no problem, there's nothing to talk about. So you have to define the problem. Then you have to say, what is the response to the problem? What are you going to do about it? You can't simply state a problem and leave people lurking like that, worrying about what is happening without presenting some idea of a solution, even if it's a theory. And then you explain the significance of that. What difference would that make? So the context is known to you. Al-dhulm is in everywhere in the Muslim Ummah, including here. There is dhulm, there is oppression, there is tumult that is not to be tolerated. The problem, ya ikhwa, is that we are not following sunnatullahi fi at-taghyir. We are not following the path that Allah Azza wa Jalla charted for us in the Quran in how to change our circumstances. Manhaj at-taghyir. We're not following it. And if I had to summarize it with two ayahs, simply two ayahs out of the Quran that will tell us what needs to be done. The first ayah, إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم. Actually twice in the Quran, Surah, I believe, Al-Ra'd and Surah Al-Hajj. Allah will not change the lot of people until they change it themselves, or until they change what's in themselves. Both meanings are appropriate. So that's the first thing. The second thing, another sunnah, is sunnah al-tadafu'. ولولا دفع الله الناس بعضهم ببعض لفسدت الأرض. In another ayah, لهدمت صوامع وبيع وصلوات ومساجد يذكر فيها اسم الله كثيرا. Allah Azza wa Jal tells us that there's this sunnah that you need to be aware of. It's called the sunnah of checking each other. Those who play chess know the concept of checkmate. When you check somebody, it means that you repel them, you push back. It's very hard to find one word to describe sunnatul tadafu'. But tadafu' comes from the word dafa'a, and dafa'a means to push. If you were in front of me, Allah, I pushed you by accident, I fell and I tripped and I pushed you, they would say, Muhammadun dafa'a fulan. It means I pushed you. In the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal tells us that there is a sunnah called sunnatul tadafu'. Those of you who are old like me, remember the days when there was the Soviet Union and there was NATO, and one was pushing the other one. They created the balance. So sunnatul tadafu' is a sunnah from Allah Azza wa Jal that prevents one party from having absolute power. As-sultatul mutlaqa mafsadatum mutlaqa. Absolute power is absolute anarchy. The sunnah of Allah Azza wa Jal is that no one should have absolute power. One of the reasons why the world is in such a big mess right now is that there is only really one unipolar power, one power, and that is the West. The East has lost most of its power, especially the economic power. The economy of the Soviet of Russia is like less than the economy of California. So even though they have nuclear bombs, but in reality, Russia is a very weak country. So sunnatul tadafu' is a sunnah from Allah Azza wa Jal among more than probably 247 sunnahs that a great Iraqi imam wrote in a book called Abdul Karim, I forgot his last name, Sunanullahi fil umami wal afradi wal jama'at. He detected in the Quran 247 sunnahs. Among them, this one sunnah called sunnatul tadafu'. So the problem, again, I said I will tell you what the context is and what the problem is. The problem is that we don't understand sunanullah. And the bigger problem is that even those among us who understand it are not doing much about it. Specifically, the concept of citizenship. We in this country, ya ikhwa, most of us are citizens. And we have the ability to do a lot as citizens. We have the ability to do a lot. I'll give you an example. People who came before us, like the civil rights movement, they were able to accomplish a lot in the last 50, 60 years. Long before Martin Luther, there was attempts at civil rights, and alhamdulillah, it culminated in many, many civil rights laws. Many of you are aware of it. What's interesting, though, is that the wife of Martin Luther King, Coretta Scott King, told her children, and I hear this directly from her son, that every generation has to earn its freedom. In other words, we can't slack and relax because some people who came before us, a generation or two, managed to enact some civil rights laws that can protect us from the government, from the majority. Everyone has to earn it, has to earn their right. So the problem that we have, ya ikhwa, and this is the main topic of today, I may not be able to finish it, I'll finish it some other time, is that we are not using our citizenship rights properly. And I'll simplify it so that you can remember it later on and pass it on to somebody else. Based on a professor by the name Bosniak, and I got this from Brother Hatem Bazian and Brother Yasser Ali, who wrote a paper about this. Dr. Bosniak says the following. She says citizenship is 4 parts. We Muslims have only 1 part. Citizenship is 4 parts. 1 part is the document. When you went and you swore and you were happy wherever you went, and they gave you that piece of paper, it says you're a naturalized citizen now, that day you became a quarter citizen. There's 3 other rights that unless you exercise them, you are really nothing more than a quarter citizen. And even that quarter of citizenship, wallahi, if we don't protect it, it could be taken away. I remind you of a case of some of our brothers who used to help our families, the orphans and everybody in Palestine. They were called the HLF-5. You know the Holy Land Foundation. Ibrahim Abu al-Muzayyan, Abdurrahman Udi, and all the others, Shukri Abu Bakr. Shukri is serving 65 years in jail. But as if that was not enough, they attempted to remove their citizenship. You see, so even this paper that you have that says you're a citizen, unless you protect it, there's no guarantee that you will continue to have it, you and your children. That's just the nature of power. Power can be abused. So 1 quarter citizenship is the document. What about the second one? The second quarter is all about a parcel of rights or a bundle of rights. When those rights are trampled upon, or when you give them up willingly, because some of us do, you have lost another quarter of your citizenship. I'll give you an example. In a city, let me see if I can remember its name. It's called Murfreesboro in Tennessee. In Murfreesboro in Tennessee, they wanted to build a masjid, like this masjid. The first thing they did, look at the steps they took to oppose them and to deprive them of their rights as American citizens. First thing they did, they said, oh, there is no proper notices to the neighbors to come in and be heard about what they think of this thing called masjid. So they went back and they made sure every single one within a certain, you know how it is with zoning laws, was notified properly. Once they passed that, then they came back and they said, there's going to be a lot of traffic here. Even though actually, if you look at the picture of the site, and there's nothing around it. It's in the middle of nowhere. They were worried about traffic. When that didn't work, they started public rallies against the masjid, and they tried to voice their opinion against it. That didn't work. They burned it down. The masjid was almost built. They burned it to the ground. When the Muslims decided to rebuild it, they came back in court and they petitioned, and their petition was that Islam is not a religion. It's seditious. That's the word they used. They said it's pure sedition. If it wasn't for the Department of Justice at the federal level coming down and saying to them, no, Islam is actually a religion. يخلف عليكم. I'm so glad that it took the Department of Justice, the highest court level in the country, to come down and actually affirm that somehow Islam is a religion. 1.6 billion people, they're not impressed. You see? So this is how far people would go to try to deprive us of a basic right that's guaranteed by the First Amendment, not the second, not the third, the First Amendment. Freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, freedom of this, freedom of that. When it comes to Muslims, they will attempt to take it away from you. There's two other rights I'll talk about after the dua. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So brothers, the first quarter has to do with the paper you and I have. The second quarter has to do with the parcel of rights that you and I must defend day in and day out. The third one, unfortunately, most of us give willingly. Some of us are actually using fatwas to make sure we lose this one. And it has to do with our political rights. We have political rights in this land. If you give them up, you're giving up a quarter of your citizenship. Let me read to you what they say about that. What Professor Bosniak, the author of the book, says about that. She says, political rights simply means that you and I are empowered to contribute to the shaping of a shared collective destiny, that we all participate in charting our future. Now, there's a community in California. If you insist, I'll find out for you where it is, but let's keep it anonymous for now. A community in California where, in the masjid over there, some ill-informed imam gave a fatwa that being part of the political process is haram. So watch what happened. The Muslims stayed away, and they're a majority. They could actually install the mayor if they want to in that community. The Muslims stayed away. They didn't vote. So who won most of the seats in the council and the mayor and everything else? A group of LGBT. And you would hope that it stops there, because these people went and changed the curriculums in such a way that Muslim kids sit in a class now, not only being taught by somebody from that persuasion, with that by itself, it's not a big problem. Real problem is now the curriculum says that it's okay to be anything you want. Now you tell me, billahi alaykum, which one is better? To have our children sit in a class being taught by having two daddies is okay, having two mommies is okay, having multiple daddies and mommies and all this hodgepodge that's going on, it's all okay. Just don't vote. Be careful, don't vote because you become a kafir somehow. You're helping a kafir. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Wallahi ya ikhwa, this is pure ignorance. Wallahi, people who advocate this kind of nonsense are driving people away from the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. I was just telling the brothers here, I have a family member in another state who himself is a university professor, has been praying from the very first day I met him. His wife is a hijabi. She's a relative of ours. Most amazing parents. Their child goes to a Muslim camp, their son. And because of everything being haram, kid comes back and eventually said, I want to change my name. I don't want to be a Muslim. I don't want to know any Muslims. I don't want to have, he told me this personally. I was having a conversation with him. He said, I don't have any Muslim friends. I don't want to have any Muslim friends. Now his sister went to a Muslim school. They drove her away. They told her she has to be submissive. She has to lower her gaze. Ya ikhwa, ghadd al-basar is required from men and women, not just from girls. She's being told that she cannot raise her gaze, her eye in front of a boy. She has to be submissive. And she can't do this and she can't do that. The girl came home, she says, I don't want to go to school. She was crying. When her mother called the school, she found out that this lady just came from overseas. And she has no idea how these kids that are being born in this country are shaped, how they think, how they're told about freedom, freedom of choice, freedom, and how we need to navigate. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself said, "Istawsu bil qawarir." He said, take care of the glassware. He used the word glassware to describe the females. In other words, they're sensitive. Be gentle with them. He called them al-qawarir. The word qarura means glass bottle. And that's how he called them. He said, be gentle with them. Aisha radiallahu anha used to say, be nice and gentle to the younger girls. And here we are telling them haram, 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 until they said, I don't want this deen. We need to stop. You want to be a citizen? Participate. Last but not least, you can have all three of them. But if you don't express solidarity with your Muslim brothers and sisters all over, if you don't identify as a Muslim, if your identity is not, if you don't choose your identity, you cannot allow people to call you a moderate Muslim, an extremist Muslim. That's our choice to make, not theirs. We can't let people separate us into moderate and not moderate and all these labels. وَأَنَّ هَذِهِ أُمَّتُكُمْ أُمَّةٌ وَاحِدَةٌ وَأَنَا رَبُّكُمْ فَاعْبُدُونَ. Allah Azza wa Jalla says you're all one ummah. Don't let anybody define you any other way. هُوَ الَّذِي سَمَّاكُمُ الْمُسْلِمُونَ مِنْ قَبْلُ. Allah calls you Muslims, you are Muslims. End of the story. To be a Muslim is to have the right to call yourself a Muslim, not let anybody call you a Muslim, and to express solidarity with your brothers and sisters wherever they are. In the next khutbah, inshallah, I'll share with you how to do that. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فيا فوز المستغفرين. اللهم انصر الإسلام وأعز المسلمين وعلي فضلك كلمة الحق والدين ووفقنا لما تحبه وترضاه يا رب العالمين. اللهم يا رب من أراد بالإسلام والمسلمين خيرا فوفقه إلى كل خير ومن أراد بالإسلام والمسلمين سوءا فخذه أخذ عزيز مقتدر. عباد الله، إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله يذكركم واستغفروه يغفر لكم وأقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
استقيموا واعتدلوا وتابعوا